talking about the four winds of heaven. My plan last week was to get through the first 8 verses, but I confess I got stuck on verse 2. And there's a lot in verse 2, as you guys have seen. And there's a lot in every one of these verses, actually. So we're not rushing through it. We're just going to take our time because what an amazing chapter to be in light of what's going on in the world right now. And when we talk about those 4 winds stirring up the great sea, we talked about the deeper meaning of that, even though it does have a literal meaning of, these forces that are stirring up the nations of the world. And these forces are spiritual forces. And so up out of the sea, and it's not the Mediterranean. If someone wants to have that view only, that's fine. It is viewed that way, but there's a deeper meaning to it, which we covered last week. And so there are really no capitals in the Hebrew or the Aramaic language, and so it shouldn't be capitalized, and it is capitalized because the translators actually believed it was a reference. I should say some of the translators did believe it was a reference to the Mediterranean Sea, so that's why it's capitalized. But technically, in the original manuscripts, it's not capitalized. And so the text itself verifies that it's not talking about a literal sea. In verse 17, John is being told by one of the holy watchers that the 4 great beasts that you saw came up out of the earth. There are 4 kingdoms that came up out of the earth. They're earthly kingdoms. And so they come up out of the sea of humanity. And that's what we've been looking at. Now, there are some different takes on it. We're not going to get too carried away with it again. But one thing for sure is we can see the nations, the multitudes, the peoples, the languages, the different Gentile empires, how they're being affected in their pride. It's almost like God is saying, now it's time. The focus is on this empire, this kingdom, and he's sending these spiritual forces, these holy angels of God, to provoke their pride, to draw the pride out. And through that, they have these anxieties, and they have fightings, and they have wars, and we see that happening right now. It's almost like these angels are stirring up the United States, stirring up the nation of Iran, stirring up Israel, and the Middle East is going ballistic, and all these nations are being pulled into it. It's no accident. These things are all being orchestrated by God to accomplish his purpose in Bible prophecy. And in Bible prophecy, the end is that God will give the kingdom to the saints, and the saints will rule and reign with God forever and forever. And God will have his kingdom. And so no matter how many earthly kingdoms come and go, at the end of all of this prophecy, the kingdom of God will be established, and the kingdom of God will be given to the saints of the Most High. And we'll get to that here in Daniel chapter 7. So we left off right there in verse 2. We kind of even went into verse 3. And they're stirring up the great sea. And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. So now we have these 4 great beasts. Remember what beasts are? Beasts are governments that reach empire status. So these are 4 great empires. Now from where we are now in time, these 4 empires to some extent are all past. They're all in the past. The only thing that's not in the past is the extension and the prolonging of the Roman Empire. So technically we are still in the time of the 4th empire. And fortunately for us, Daniel and John have a lot of interest in the 4th beast, which is the Roman Empire. So the Roman Empire continues longer than any of the other empires. And now we are living somewhere around the end of the final formation of the Roman Empire. We're living in those days. And there's nothing that comes after the Roman Empire except, remember the rock in chapter 2 of Daniel that was cut out of the mountain without hands, that struck the image of Nebuchadnezzar's dream on the feet and shattered all of them? That is a symbol of the return of Christ to establish his kingdom. So that's where all this is leading. All this is leading to that stone that would return and be cut out of the mountain, the empire of God, and destroy all the earthly empires, and God's empire, his kingdom, will be established on the earth for 1,000 years. That's kind of where we're moving, and we're close to that now. We have the benefit of looking back. Now, what I want you to do is you can look at the Thursday night Telegram feed if you have your phone right now. Don't let it distract you, though. Because one of the last things I posted today was the chart again so that you guys would have it tonight. So if you go to that chart, it's vital for you to understand how this chart is describing to us, the empires, because it'll make a lot more sense. And so when you look at the chart, you'll see the little man at the top. That little man is Daniel, and Daniel is looking forward to the future. And from the point of Daniel, where he's standing in time, he's standing at the point of Babylon. So he's standing at the beginning of these four empires, and Daniel lives all the way through the Babylonian Empire, and now he's kind of in the Persian Empire, and then he will go to be with the Lord sometime in the early days of the Persian Empire. Why is that important? Because the Persian Empire is modern day Iran. Whoa. Well, wait, we thought the Persian Empire fell. It did. But their nations have been prolonged for a season of time. They still exist. But when the Fourth Empire comes to its end, there will be no prolonging of the Fourth Empire. The Roman Empire will be totally destroyed by the return of Christ. There will be no prolonging of the Roman Empire. It is the final empire. So we look at these four beasts that come up out of the sea, and the four beasts are basically there on your chart: the lion, the bear, and the leopard. And if you follow the lines up to the top where the image is laying across the page, that is the image that's revealed in Daniel chapter 2, the head of gold, the chest and arms of silver, the belly and thighs of bronze, and the legs of iron, and the feet of iron and clay. So what we see there, if you follow those little lines on the chart, you'll see that Babylon is the head of gold. You'll see the Medo-Persian Empire is basically the chest and arms of silver, and then they will be conquered by the Grecian Empire, the belly and thighs of bronze or brass. And then comes the fourth beast, which is the Roman Empire, and it's not named as an animal because it is so ferocious and so phenomenal. John doesn't know how to give an animal name to it because it's beyond any animal that we've ever seen on the earth. So he just leaves it out. He says it's dreadful, terrible, exceedingly strong, exceedingly crushing and breaking in pieces everything. And that is the Roman Empire. And so we're going to get a description of these four beasts so that we can know that it is for sure Babylon, Medo-Persian Empire, and the Grecian Empire, and the Roman Empire. So go back to the passage there in verse 4. Let's read through a few of these verses. The first, that would be the beast, the first beast in this vision that Daniel had in his dream while on his bed, and he writes down the main facts telling the dream. He says, the first beast that I saw was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I watched till the wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And suddenly Another beast, a second like a bear. It was raised up on one side and had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and they said thus to it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and there was another beast like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird, and the beast also had 4 heads. That's kind of a freaky beast, right? This beast is a leopard with 4 heads. And dominion was given to this beast. After this I saw in a night vision, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring and breaking in pieces and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots, and there in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. That would be God the Father. His garment was white as snow, and his hair of his head was pure wool. His throne was a fiery flame, its wheels a burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. 1,000 thousands ministered to him. 10,000s times 10,000s stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were open. Now that's quite the vision, and that's just part of it, okay? And that's just the part that he recorded. To get all of it, we have to go to Revelation. Revelation gives us the details of these prophecies of these beastly empires. In fact, here in Daniel we have 4. But out of that 4th empire, the Roman Empire, comes another empire according to the book of Revelation, and that empire will be the little horn who gets wounded by a sword. And that little horn goes into the bottomless pit. That is the holding place for those who have died. It's also the holding place for fallen angels when God wants to imprison them for his purpose to be used in the future. They're all going to eventually end up in the lake of fire that burns forever and forever. And so, understand that before we look at this, that this is a scene that takes us into the realm of the dead. But when the Antichrist is killed, when him and his government is killed by God in Revelation 19, he's going to be destroyed when Jesus Christ comes back. These two, the Antichrist and the false prophet, or we shouldn't really call it the Antichrist, the beast government and the false prophet are gathered together and thrown into the lake of fire, and they are the first inhabitants of the lake of fire according to the scriptures. And so as we look at these beasts, we try to identify them to see if America fits into any of the images that the parts of the vision that Daniel is trying to explain to us. And I propose to you that America is a major proponent of the final form of the Roman Empire. And I'm going to show you that as we break this down. And so, and whenever I present this to our experts today, and I've had opportunities to do that, they go ballistic. They don't know what to do with it. They can't refute it. There's so much scripture to identify America in prophecy. They have actually stopped saying it. They used to say America's not in prophecy. Have you noticed they kind of stopped saying that lately? They have. And so, and I'm not saying it's because of my view on it, I'm just saying they have to consider what's here, and if they're genuine and honest and take the scriptures literally, they cannot say that America's not in Bible prophecy because they have no scripture to back that up. The only thing they have is the name America is not mentioned in the Bible. And if you only have that, that is not enough to say America is not in the Bible. Because those same scholars and teachers will tell you Russia's in the Bible, they'll tell you Europe's in the Bible, they'll tell you that China's in the Bible, but find those names in the Bible. They're not there. So how do we know those nations are in the Bible? Well, you go back and you trace the ancient people from those nations to the modern day nations, and you can be sure that they are in the Bible. We know that Russia's in the Bible because you can trace the ancient people to the modern day nations and know that this is speaking of Russia. Gog and Magog in Ezekiel 38 and 39. And so we can do the same thing with America. We're not dumb, are we? We can go back and we can look at where the founding fathers of America came from, and we can clearly see where America is in prophecy without the name America being mentioned. A lot of times the Bible don't give those kind of details. It's wanting us to study, to show ourselves approved, and to do the hard work that it takes to understand the scriptures, and especially the things dealing with prophecy in the days we're living in, so that we can't be lured into deception. And so we study, and that's why we're here. And we look at what the scriptures say, and we follow the clear teaching of scripture. And we let the Bible interpret the Bible. And if you do that, you're not going to get yourself in trouble, because the Bible does interpret the Bible. And so, let's look at the description of these four beasts. Look at verse 4. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I watched till its wings were plucked off. Now, what is this talking about? The symbol of a lion, which is a ferocious predator, it's a description of a ferocious government that is very powerful, like a lion. But notice it says like a lion. It's not saying it was a lion. So there we have symbolic language. Now, if you go back and you look at the archaeological digs, am I saying that right? Archaeological digs of Babylon, you'll find out that they found lions. Not only did they find lions, but they found lions with wings. So there were all these images of lions with wings painted on the gates of Babylon, and they found statues of lions with wings in Babylon. So for sure, according to these digs, they found out that Babylon's symbol, you know how America has the symbol of the eagle, right? And so we see that here we see the symbol of Babylon was a lion with wings. And so the eagle is like a predator bird, and the lion is like a very vicious animal that devours its prey. And so it's painting the picture of Nebuchadnezzar and the kingdom of Babylon, and they were very powerful. They were like a lion with eagle's wings. Does that make sense? But notice what it says there. It says, I watched. This is Daniel. I watched in the vision till the wings were plucked off. What does that mean? Well, do you guys remember what we talked about in Daniel chapter 4? When Nebuchadnezzar was exalting himself and taking glory for the kingdom of Babylon and not giving the glory to God, what happened to Nebuchadnezzar? His wings were clipped. He can no longer soar. He was driven out from his throne and made to crawl on the ground like a wild animal of the field, and he thought he was an animal. In fact, back in chapter 4, it says God humbled him and took his human heart and gave him the heart of an animal. He literally went insane, and he was driven out into the pig pen, so to speak, and lived like the wild animals of the field. God chopped down the tree. The tree represented King Nebuchadnezzar and the kingdom of Babylon. And God said, I'm going to humble you, king. And God sent the holy watchers to chop down the tree, and they left a little stump in the ground because God wasn't done with Nebuchadnezzar. But he was driven out, and he lived in the pig pen with the animals for roughly 7 years until he looked up and he acknowledged that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men. And then his heart was changed again, and God gave him the heart of a man. So it went from the heart of a man to the heart of an animal in that humiliation that God sent his way. And then once he was humiliated to the maximum point and he looked up and he acknowledged God, he repented, then God restored the human heart back to the man. So when it says the wings were plucked off, Nebuchadnezzar was humbled. He was no longer able to soar like he used to. And now it's all symbolism. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so here we see he was lifted up from the earth. That's his act of humility there after being in the pig pen for 7 years. He was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And a man's heart was given to this beast government ruled by Babylon. And so you can go back and you can read the end of Daniel chapter 4, and you can see how his heart was changed and he acknowledged that God rules in the kingdom of men. Let's go back and read it so it makes more sense. Look at chapter 4. Nebuchadnezzar was driven from men and ate grass. This is verse 33, sorry. He was driven from men and he ate grass like oxen. His body was wet with the dew of heaven till his hair had grown like eagle's feathers. Interesting, right? Mm-hmm. And his nails like bird's claws. And at the end of time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lived at the end of the 7 years of humbling in the pig, being humbled and living in the pig pen. He lifted up his eyes to heaven, and his understanding returned to him. And he said, I blessed the Most High and praised and honored him who lives forever. His heart was changed. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing, and he does according to his will in the army of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. No one can restrain his hand or say to him, what have you done? And notice verse 36. In the same time, my reason returned to me. My heart was removed, the beastly heart that had been given to me. My reason returned to me. My mind got straightened out. And for the glory of my kingdom, my honor, my splendor returned to me. My counselors, my nobles restored to me. I was restored in my kingdom. And an excellent spirit of majesty was added to me. And so, now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, of all whose works are truth and his ways just, and those who walk in pride he is able to humble. So there we see the humbling experience that Nebuchadnezzar went through, and now he's been restored, and now he's praising and extolling and honoring the God of heaven. Now he knows that he's not the ruler of the kingdom, God is. And so he's acknowledging that. He's repented and his heart is restored. So his wings were clipped for the purpose of humbling him and restoring him and bringing him into restoration and saving his soul. God is gracious, compassionate, and loving and long-suffering towards us, not willing that any should perish. And God's working in this man's life because there was another man, a righteous man, that was praying for the king. And his name is Daniel. Does that make sense? So God answered Daniel's prayers for this pagan king, and his kingdom was restored to him. So there you have a very detailed, in just one verse though, very detailed picture of King Nebuchadnezzar and the kingdom of Babylon, which fits perfectly. So we're not like guessing as to who these beasts are. It's pretty clear when you understand what is being said through the vision that Daniel received. And suddenly another beast, verse 5, back in chapter 7, and suddenly another beast a second, like a bear. Not much is said about the bear. The bear is the Medo-Persian Empire, and it was raised up, on one side. You ever seen a bear? You know, a bear's sometimes got one leg off the ground, raised up on one side. And the reason it's saying it was raised up on one side is because the Medo-Persian Empire. There's two kingdoms that have confederated together, the Medes and the Persians, and the Persian side of the empire was the stronger side of the empire. It was raised up on one side. And on that one side, the Persian side, it was devouring, breaking in pieces. It was going after much flesh, because the Medo-Persian army was a powerful military army that conquered Babylon. Now, to conquer Babylon, you had to become pretty powerful. And so the four winds of heaven are stirring up the great sea, stirring up the nations, raising up another empire, because prophecy will be fulfilled. And now the Medo-Persian Empire is devouring much flesh. And notice what it says. It had 3 ribs in its mouth. Now, the 3 ribs in its mouth, most scholars believe it's a reference to the 3 main other empires that they conquered. And the 3 empires that they conquered was Lydia, Babylon, and Egypt. And so those 3 ribs in this bear's mouth, between its teeth, by the way, represent the big empires. They had conquered more empires, but these were the 3 big ones that they had devoured. And so it's a picture of the Medo-Persian army coming in, and we have that story, actually, how it all happened, and how they, at least how they conquered Babylon at the end of Daniel chapter 5, which we already covered. How they came under the walls of the city, they went in and they killed King Belshazzar that very night. He died when the handwriting was on the wall. You guys remember that? And so this is exactly what it's talking about. So he had these 3 ribs in his mouth between his teeth. Now there's something really interesting here, and I want to point this out to you. Notice what it says. And they said thus to it, arise, devour much flesh. Did you catch anything there? They said. Who's the they? That should be the first question that comes to your mind. Who's the they given the command to the Medo-Persian Empire to devour much flesh? Well, that makes a very interesting point. Is that somebody's car? Don't worry, they're just driving it for a little while. So, someone is giving a command to the empire to go and devour much flesh. Who is the they? Don't you think that's a good question? Mm-hmm. Because no one's been mentioned except the 4 winds of heaven. Now, remember what we said about the 4 winds of heaven. The 4 winds of heaven, if you go deeper, are pointing to the 4 living creatures with the eyes all around and in front and all and in back, and they see everything. They never take their eyes off of God. In Revelation chapter 4, remember they're singing, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and who is to come." And they break out in worship in heaven. And when they do, the 24 elders fall on their face. They represent the church, because the church will be in heaven by the time we get to the end of that Roman Empire. We'll be raptured somewhere before the final form of it manifests itself. But we'll be in heaven and we'll be worshiping before the throne. And so here we see that they is probably a reference, we can't be sure, but it's probably a reference to those 4 winds of heaven, those holy watchers that were mentioned in Daniel chapter 4. The one of these 4 Daniel's going to speak to in this chapter. And so it's not like these angelic beings are disconnected from what's going on. It's not like they're just stirring up the great sea. They're totally involved in the fulfillment of these prophecies of the Gentile nations. And so they, I believe, represents the 4 winds that are stirring up the great sea, and one of those watchers are giving the command to the Medo-Persian Empire to go and conquer much flesh. Does that make sense? So there we have the first two beasts from Daniel's perspective in the vision. We have Babylon and the Medo-Persian. And then in verse 6, after this I looked, and there was another like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird, and the beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Now, as we go through Daniel, especially in chapter 8, we're going to see this mighty conquering king, this Grecian king. His name is Alexander the Great. You ever heard his name before? Well, he is the one who came to power in the Grecian Empire. And this guy was a warrior. This guy had one of the fastest moving militaries that the world had ever seen. And so this leopard, this Grecian Empire is described as a leopard with 4 wings of a bird on its back, and those wings represent the rapid speed that Alexander the Great could move his military power. And so Alexander the Great comes and he conquers the Medo-Persian Empire, and he establishes this next dominating superpower of the world known as the Grecian Empire. But what about the 4 heads that are on this leopard? That's a weird looking leopard, don't you think? The leopard has wings, and it has 4 wings, and it has 4 heads. Well, if you know anything about Alexander the Great, around the age of 27, he conquered the entire world. His kingdom was much bigger than Babylon, much bigger than the Medo-Persian, and I'm talking territory. He conquered more territory than any other kingdoms. And this guy is now boasting, and he's proud of what he's done, and he's celebrating it, and he goes and he has a few drinks, and he's partying because he's conquered the world. And he gets drunk, and he goes out in the rain, and he passes out, and he's in the weather, the cold and the rain, and he catches pneumonia, and he dies. Alexander the Great died at the age of 33 years old. Now, what happened to his empire when he died? Well, historians tell us it was given to 4 of his generals. When he died, his 4 generals were standing around him, and they watched him die. But before he died, he gave the kingdom to 4 of his generals. Now, one of was Cassander, the other one was Lysimachus, the other was the Seleucid king or general, and they became kings. And then you have the Ptolemy. So you have 4 generals, and these generals went out in all these directions. Like the Seleucids went to the north, the Ptolemies went to the south down in Egypt, and then there was they were also in the Middle East, and they were in fact right between them, in the middle of them was Israel. And so this is where one of the leaders of the Grecian Empire that comes to power in Daniel 8, who is a little horn, his name is Antiochus Epiphanes. We'll talk more about him when we get to chapter 8, but he persecutes the Jewish people and becomes a type of the Antichrist. Now, all that's in history. But what we're going to see here in chapter 7, the little horn in chapter 7, is not in history, it's still future. But when we study about the little horn of chapter 8, it's going to help us understand what's happening with the little horn in chapter 7. Am I losing anybody? Everybody good? So this is just the Grecian Empire. When we talk about the leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads, and to him was given dominion, and he ruled for about 200 years. Now, all these kingdoms, these 3 first kingdoms, their rule was roughly about 200 years, a little bit more in some cases. But none of them ruled as long as the Roman Empire. So now we come to the Roman Empire. And this empire will involve us because it is extended into the future in the time that we live right now. So look what it says in verse 7. After this I saw in the night vision, and behold, 4 beasts, the fourth beast, not four beasts, the fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. There's the clue, right? What was the Roman Empire? The legs of iron. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it. Why was it different? Because it was so powerful. It was a powerful, powerful military known for their iron, their shields, their swords, their chariots. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. And it was different from all the beasts that were before it. And it was different because it had 10 horns. Okay. So now we're not looking at 4 heads, but we're looking at 4 horns. Now, or 10 horns, sorry. Gee, so many numbers, it's kind of hard to keep track of it all, right? But if you look at the chart, it'll make more sense. And so you have the Roman Empire, the old Roman Empire, dreadful, terrible, exceedingly strong, breaking in pieces, crushing everything. That's what the old Roman Empire did. And it was a dominating superpower in the times of the arrival of Christ. So we're talking about roughly 2,000 years ago, the Roman Empire was in power, the old Roman Empire. But the old Roman Empire wasn't really conquered by any specific other dominating superpower. They had all these little skirmishes, and they were undermined by all these little skirmishes from these different people groups that were coming into the territory as they were being weakened from corruption from within. This is what was going on in the Roman Empire. Corruption on the inside. And they started to fall apart, and then there were these little skirmishes, and the Roman Empire, the old Roman Empire, fell apart. But when it fell apart, it's going to be transformed, or extended, I should say, into 10 kings, 10 horns. The horns represent 10 kings. We know that from Revelation 17. And so, out of the old Roman Empire, it never ceased to exist. It was being transformed into something else, and that something else was different from all the other empires that came before it. It had 10 horns. And in the Bible, horns are symbolic for powers, or powerful nation states. Nations that become powerful. They're not powerful enough to be considered empires, like the old Roman Empire was, or like the Babylonian Empire was, but they are nation states. So when the old Roman Empire fell apart, and I put this on the Telegram site for Thursday night, you can go back, it's kind of a long read. Some of you guys may not be interested in it, but if you are, it's there. And you can see what happened after the old Roman Empire fell. And the guy writing the article that I posted is Isaac Newton. You ever heard of him? Yeah. Sir Isaac Newton. The guy was a brain. He was a smart man. And he was a Bible student. And he wrote about the fall of the Roman Empire. And he wrote about these 10 people groups that came up and occupied the land of the old Roman Empire. And these 10 people groups are represented by these 10 horns. The 10 horns are on the head of the fourth beast. What's the fourth beast?
Roman Empire.
The Roman Empire, right?
Yeah.
The fourth beast here in Daniel's vision is the Roman Empire, and the 10 horns are on the head because they're heads. According to John in Revelation, John saw 7 plus 1, 8 heads on the beast. Look at your chart. And so these empires are not just called beastly governments, but they're also referred to in the book of Revelation as heads. And heads are mountains, and mountains in the Bible are symbolic for empires. So we have these 10 people groups that come in and occupy the land of the old Roman Empire. See what we're doing? We're tracing now what took place after the fall of the old Roman Empire. Now, what happened with these, and you can read who those 10 are, because it's on the Telegram site. I'm not going to get into all that because we'll be here all night if I do. But you can look at it yourself and see who those original 10 people groups were that took the land after the fall of the old Roman Empire and became nations that we know today in Europe. Okay? And the history is laid out by Isaac Newton and shows you exactly what happened. But there's more. There's a lot more. Check this out. Look at the next verse, verse 8. Daniel says, I was considering the horns, the 10. I was considering the horns. He's referring to the 10 horns. And I'll show you why the 10 horns are on the head of the fourth beast in a minute. I was considering the horns. What are horns? Who can tell me what horns are?
Powerful nations.
Powerful nation states that aren't empires, but they exist as nation states in the world. They exist right now. We're not waiting for 10 kings to come that is going to produce the Antichrist. No, all of this has happened in history. We're looking back and we see these 10 people groups that have become what we see today, modern day Europe, Spain, France, Germany, and so on. You can read it there on the Telegram channel when you get home tonight. You can stay up to 5 in the morning and get very knowledgeable about the subject. You guys are going to rebuke me now, right? But if you're really interested, it's there for you. And so, what does he see? I was considering the horns, and there was, another horn. And don't forget, the Roman Empire is the legs of iron. And remember, the legs of iron also had feet. The feet was partly of iron, partly of clay. And the feet had what? 10 toes. The 10 toes are the same as the 10 horns, just a different vision. Nebuchadnezzar saw one, Daniel saw the other. You guys tracking with that? Don't lose track of that. Because the Bible is consistent in its interpretation. The Bible interprets the Bible. We're not having to guess as to who these 10 horns are, because they're the same as the 10 horns connected to the Roman Empire. And here we see Daniel connecting the 10 horns to the fourth empire, which is Rome. But while he was considering the horns, there was another one coming up among them. And if you look over at verse 24, notice what it says in Daniel 7. And another shall rise after them, and he shall be different from the first ones. And he shall subdue 3 kings, and he shall speak pompous words against the Most High, and shall persecute the saints of the Most High. But notice what it says there. It says he came up from them in verse 8, and he's coming up after them. So he's coming up out of these horns, and he's coming up after these horns. So we look at this and we see this little horn. Now, in the Aramaic, because this part of Daniel is written in Aramaic, little could mean young. So this is not little in the sense of small, even though when this little horn is birthed out of Europe, this little horn is coming out of what we know today as Europe. Those 10 people groups became Europe, and out of Europe came another nation state. And according to the lexicons, it means a little, insignificant power, horns of power. So this little insignificant power horn becomes a nation. So Europe gives birth to another nation that's different from all the other horns. Interesting. So little, not only here in Daniel 7, not only means insignificant, but it also means young. If you look it up in the Hebrew language over in Daniel chapter 8, speaking of the little horn, it's a different little horn, but the meaning is the same. Hebrew is more clear than the Aramaic. It clearly says in the lexicon that it's young, it's a young power. And we can't just go by that though, right? We need more. The strongest thing you can have to prove something in the Bible is the context that it's being said in. Now, in the context of this, it's saying the little horn not only came from them, another horn came up from them, but it came up after them. Now, if that little horn came up after the 10 horns, what does that tell you? That's the birth of another nation. And that other nation is going to be younger than the 10 that it came up after, right? If it came up after the 10 already existed, doesn't that make that nation a younger nation? So this is a young nation. This little horn is a young, it's not a man. Now, I got my Calvary Chapel shirt on for you guys tonight because I used to be a Calvary Chapel pastor, and I taught that the little horn is a man because that's what I was taught in Calvary Chapel, and I was studying it, but I saw what they were teaching, and I was okay with it at first, and so I kept studying it. And as I studied it, I started to realize this ain't a man. When you look at it close, this isn't a man. Now, why would I say that? Because Pastor Chuck, whom I love and I benefited tremendously from, who was a great Bible teacher, and I will tell you, if you're going to follow anybody, follow Chuck's teaching. But Chuck didn't see this because it wasn't for his time. And I believe he did see it before he died. And the reason he did see it, because when he was in his 80s, I worked right next to him in the trench at the hot springs. And I shared this view with him that it's not a man, Chuck, but it's the birth of a young nation that came out of Europe. And he listened because Chuck was that kind of guy. And I said, what do you think about that? And he said to me, I can't refute that. You could be right. But at his age, right, he's not going to go back and change his commentaries. So this is what Calvary Chapel still teaches today. In general, they teach that the little horn is a man that comes up out of 10 kings that hasn't even come to power yet. They won't come to power until the tribulation. And in the tribulation, 10 kings will arise, just kings. And out of the 10 kings will come a man who will be the man of sin, the Antichrist. That's what they teach. And if you want to hold to that view, that's fine. I did for years, right? But here's the problem. They have a major problem because Chuck Smith and most of the Calvary Chapels, and I'm not ragging on them, I'm just sharing truth with you guys. Like I said, they're some of the best Bible teachers that we have in the world today. But here's the problem. And this is what they say. They say the 10 horns are 10 nations in the future. But they're nations. The 10 horns are nations. But the little horn is not a nation, it's a man. Can you see the problem with that alone? The problem with that alone is you're breaking symbolic interpretation in the same verse. When you take symbolism and you let it be interpreted by the Bible, which they correctly do, the 10 horns are 10 nations, but they fail to see the 10 nations are not coming in the future. They already exist in the days we live in. They already exist. And these 10 nations are the nations of Europe. Now, you might say, well, there's more than 10 nations in Europe, Kent. Yes, there is. But the 10 are inside the more. The 10 are the ones the Bible is concerned with, and God is going to use in the last half of the tribulation period to accomplish his purpose. So when you come to this, you can't say the 10 nations are nations, or the 10 horns are nations, and then flip the symbolic language and say that little horn is just a man. If you do that, you're in violation of proper hermeneutics when it comes to symbolism in the Bible. Now, sometimes symbol changes in the Bible, but it's never changed in the same passage, especially in the same verse. Does that make sense? You guys tracking with that? So, That was the first thing that got my attention. The second thing that got my attention as I studied this and taught it over and over again, by the way, is this. Look what it says. The little one, if we read it like it is in the original, there was another horn, a young one, a young nation, coming up among them, that came up after them, making it a young nation, context, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. By the way, that hasn't happened yet. That's still going to happen in the future. The 3 horns will be plucked out. So 3 of the 10 will be plucked out by the roots when this horn reaches its dominating power. This little horn is going to become an empire, a 7th head on the beast. How do you know that? Well, look at the chart. We already know who the first 6 beast was according to John in Revelation. We have, as John's looking back, we have Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persian, Grecian. 5 of those have fallen according to Revelation chapter 17. One is, the one that was in existence when John wrote the book of Revelation, was Rome, the old Roman Empire. And then you see all the little squares there. All those little squares represent horns that came out of the Roman Empire. And then the little horn, which I believe is America, came out of the European community. Europe gave birth to America in 1776. The nation was formed. A young nation that came out of Europe. Now, what's the further proof? When that nation reaches its dominating power, which it won't right now, because before America can reach dominating world power in the final fulfillment that God has planned for it, it has to be revived itself. It's going to be wounded by a sword. Some military attack is going to happen to America as we know it right now, according to Revelation 13. John said, I saw one of the heads as though it had been wounded by the sword, and the deadly wound was healed. Well, how do we know what head that is? Well, it's simple. If you read what's written there in Revelation 13, speaking of that head, it says the same thing in regards to that head as Daniel tells us here. The head was speaking pompous words against the Most High, or the horn was speaking pompous words against the Most High, and was persecuting the saints of the Most High. Then we go to Revelation, which is thousands of years later after this prophecy is given, and we find that little horn is now a head, an empire, the 7th head on the beast. How do we know? Because John says, I saw the beast making war with the saints, and I saw him speaking pompous words and blasphemy against the Most High God. There's the clue. From Daniel to Revelation, you have to connect those dots. What has happened is the little insignificant horn that was birthed out of Europe in 1776 has become a dominating world superpower. And it has major aspects of the old Roman Empire. You don't believe me? Just take a look at those aircraft carriers. Huge iron, metal, trampling, breaking, dropping bombs. It's all connected. Huge iron teeth, devouring, breaking in pieces, crushing. You don't think that's true? Talk to an Iranian. They'll tell you how real the American superpower is. But something's going to happen. That head, one of those heads, Revelation 13:4 says was wounded by a sword. Something's coming. And the Bible calls it the mortal wound. But the deadly wound will be healed in Revelation 13. The deadly wound will be healed after the 7th head is wounded. It will be healed, and when it is healed, it will turn to its partners in Europe, and they will break away from globalism and join the resurrected beast who was wounded by the sword, and they will give their power. Europe will become a nationalist. They will go back to being nationalistic states like the beast will be. He's not a globalist. The conflict is between globalism and nationalism. America represents nationalism. The globalists are going to deliver the mortal wound to the American empire, and after the deadly wound was healed, the American empire will rise out of the ashes of what used to be America, and they will confederate with the 10 kings. All this is in Revelation 17, with the 10 kings of Europe where they came from, and they will be the final beast, the 8th head on the beast, for the last 3.5 years of the tribulation. Now look at this close with me though. Did I lose anybody? I hope not. We can go back and read Revelation 17 if you guys want to. But you should read it because the angel is interpreting all this for John, just like the angel is going to interpret this for Daniel, so we don't have to guess, right? But look what it says here about this little horn. He's going to pluck out 3 by the roots, and that's not going to happen until he becomes the 8th head, confederated with the 10 kings. So you say, well, if he plucks out 3, that only leaves 7 horns, so why is there 10 in Revelation? Because when he plucks out the 3, there's still going to be 10, because the book of Revelation says there's going to be 10. So he comes to power, he plucks out 3, and 3 take the place of the 3 that were plucked out. And there's still 10, according to the book of Revelation. That hasn't happened yet. But we could be seeing the beginning of that right now. We're watching the American empire crushing and destroying. I mean, when we went into Venezuela, and I'm not saying that's a fulfillment of the 3, but could it be a clue of how they went into Venezuela and just did whatever they wanted to do? And now they're over in Iran just crushing and destroying and making sure the world knows who the dominating superpower is. It's pretty clear. And by the way, the Bible is very clear that that dominating superpower of the last days is from the West, from the Roman Empire. So according to the Bible, the dominating superpower of the last days is a Western superpower that's a young nation that came out of Europe, that becomes an empire that receives a mortal wound, and the deadly wound is healed to then confederate with the 10 kings that are waiting for a kingdom. They are a kingdom, but they're nation states. But they're waiting for an empire status. And when the beast rises up out of the ashes after the mortal wound, the new America, then those nation states will come together to form the final form of the Roman Empire, the 8th head on the beast, and that's mentioned in Revelation 17. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. That's about as clear as can be in the scriptures. I don't know, once you see this, if you don't agree with it, you're just going to have to walk away and put your head down because there's no scripture to refute it. And so, look what it says though. Not only does he pluck 3 out, and there in this horn, that little horn, were eyes, like the eyes of a man. Now, I'm not the sharpest pencil in the pack, but if you're telling me the little horn is a man of sin, the Antichrist only, it's not a nation, why would this say the man has eyes? We would know that if it's a man has eyes, right? But notice what it says there, like the eyes. He had eyes like the eyes of a man. So it's not a man. This is a nation that has intel, satellites. They have the ability to use their intelligence to look down upon the whole world. I think that's what it's talking about. Mm-hmm. This horn was given eyes, intelligence. What's another word for it? It's like a police state, kind of. They can see everything. If you know anything about the satellites that the U.S. has in space, you know that they can watch everything going on. The movement of the military of Iran, the movement of China, the movement of Russia, they can see it all. This horn has eyes, surveillance, that's the word I was looking for. They have an amazing surveillance system. Eyes. You know, the all-seeing eye, you know how God sees everything? This government wants to be God. They have eyes, they have intelligence, they have surveillance, they can see it all. And notice what else it says. Not only does it have eyes, but it's symbolic because it has eyes like the eyes of a man. It also has a mouth. But notice it doesn't say he has a mouth like a mouth. He has a mouth speaking pompous words. And when you keep reading, it's going to say he has a mouth speaking pompous words against God. Eventually, when America is healed and comes out of the ashes, it will be ran and operated or controlled by the man of sin, the Antichrist as we know him, and he will speak blasphemies against God, according to Revelation chapter 13. And so, with that said, what does it mean that he has a mouth? Well, he's going to have a platform. He's going to have a podium. He's going to be able to speak blasphemous words about God to the entire world. He's going to be the center of attention, and he's going to give a blasphemous message against God, and he's going to blaspheme the saints of God, according to Revelation 13. Now, I want to do something right now. We're going to stop right there, but I want to do something to verify everything I just said to you by letting the Bible interpret the Bible. Now, when you get home tonight, though, I want you to go and read the rest of this chapter, because in this chapter, the angel, or one of the watchers, is going to speak to Daniel, because Daniel's like, he's kind of like one of those guys that want to know more about Bible prophecy. Is that anybody here? They want to know more? Some guys say, I don't want to know it, I don't want to know it. But there are people that I want to know. Daniel's one of those guys. And so Daniel's going to ask the angel, because he's troubled. He's like, I'm troubled by all this. I don't get it. I don't understand it all. And the angel's going to come now and explain to Daniel in the rest of this chapter what it all means. But for us, we can get it from Revelation. Turn to Revelation 17, and we'll close with this. In Revelation 17, John gets all the detail that Daniel didn't get. Daniel kept pressing, I want to know more, I want to go your way, Lord, and tell Daniel, go your way, dude. It's not for you right now, it's for the future. And Daniel was kind of shut down and said, seal it up, it's not for you. But John comes along and unveils it all. He unveils everything. It's amazing what's here. Look at chapter 17 with me. I'm going to break this down so that you can see what I said is interpreted by the Bible. And so look at verse 7 of chapter 17. And John is speaking to an angel. But the angel said to me, why did you marvel when you saw the woman riding the beast? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has 7 heads and 10 horns. What's the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns? Look at your chart. It's right there. And then we're going to find out there's an 8th one. Right? But the 8th is of the 7. Look what he says here. I'm going to tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast that carries her, which has 7 heads and 10 horns. You ready for this? Verse 8. The beast that you saw was and is not, and will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to perdition. Now, let me read that again. The beast that you saw, America, wounded by the sword, that 7th head, don't exist anymore. It was destroyed in a mortal wound. And is not. It no longer exists. And will ascend out of the bottomless pit. The deadly wound will be healed. That's lining up with Revelation 13. So the beast that you saw was and is not. Connect that to the mortal wound. And will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to perdition. Eventually, that beast will be cast into the lake of fire in Revelation 19. And those who dwell on earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the Lamb's book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast, that government, that beast that was, I'm sorry, let me read that again. And the world, when they see the beast that was and is not and yet is. So they're going to see the beast that was and is not, ceased to exist, was wounded by the sword and destroyed, and went into the bottomless pit, the holding place for the dead, and yet is. Comes back to life as it's resurrected after the mortal wound. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains. Mountains are empires on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings, and that can be translated kingdoms or empires. There's also 7 kingdoms. 5 have fallen, one is, the other is not yet come. But when he comes, he must continue a short time. Who's the one here that hadn't come yet? 5 have fallen. Look at your chart. What's the 5 that have fallen? Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persian, Grecian Empire. 5 have fallen. One is the Roman Empire, and the other one hasn't come. Remember, John's writing around the time of the Roman Empire. The old Roman Empire was still existing when John wrote the book of Revelation, and he's saying one is, that's the Roman Empire, but the other one hasn't come yet. It hasn't been birthed yet out of Europe. That empire hasn't come yet, but it's coming. That empire will come, and here's the mind which has wisdom, and he goes on to tell us that 5 have fallen, one is, the other has not yet come, but when he comes, he must continue a short time. He's going to continue for the last half of the tribulation period after the mortal wound. The beast that was and is not and yet is. He lives again. He received the mortal wound and he went into the bottomless pit. Him and his government, if it includes the man, it may not, but the entire government are demon-possessed people that will go into the bottomless pit during the mortal wound. But in Revelation 11, the beast ascends out of the bottomless pit to kill the 2 prophets. And so the beast comes back, the beast that was and is not and yet is. And notice what it says, the beast that was and is not is himself in verse 11, also the 8th. Wow. So the one that was of the 7, the beast who received the mortal wound, is the 8th. So when he comes back, he will become the 8th head on the beast, confederated with the 10 kings of Europe. Now, I don't know how much clearer that can get. And the 10 horns, verse 12, which you saw, are 10 kings or kingdoms who have received no kingdom superpower status with an empire as yet. They exist, but they're not an empire. They're nation states. They're kings with kingdoms, but they haven't been able to put the old Roman Empire back together yet, and they're waiting. They haven't received that empire yet. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. And that beast is the one whose deadly wound was healed. And these are of one mind, and will give their power and authority to the beast. These will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are called chosen and faithful. And then he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw, and if you have New King James, it says on, but you'll see that there's a reference there that on is not in the original. Instead, it should be and. And so the 10 horns which you saw and the beast, these will hate the harlot, make her desolate, naked, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. So what does the beast and the 10 nations do? They go into the city of Jerusalem, where the harlot, globalism, is represented in the last part of the tribulation. They go in and they destroy the nation of Israel because the harlot has their headquarters there. And that's why Jesus said in the middle of the tribulation, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, when you see that, to the Jewish people, get out. In Matthew 24, get out of the city of Jerusalem, because it is going to be destroyed by the beast superpower, the 8th head, confederated with the 10 kings of Europe. They're going to hate what Israel represents, and they're going to go in and they're going to destroy the great harlot of Babylon, which controlled the beast and destroyed the beast in the mortal wound. You guys see that?
Yes.
Read it over and over again. It's right there. It's amazing. Any questions?